Well, good evening, everybody. We'd like to open the meeting, the agenda for the special meeting of the corporate authorities of the Village of Campton Hills, November 17th, 2025, 7:30 PM. Roll call.
Trustee Muir,
Here.
Trustee Boatner,
Here.
Trustee Burson,
Here.
Trustee Hoppensberger,
Here.
Trustee Benetti. Here. Trustee Benetti is participating remotely due to a work conflict where he's out of town. And Trustee Millette is absent and excused at this time, might join us later. And President Winnicki,
Present.
you have a quorum.
All right, thank you. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. And Kim, will you lead us? God bless you. Okay, we'll move on to public comments.
Before we do that,
Yes,
If you could ask for a motion to allow Trustee Benetti to participate remotely.
okay, I'll accept a
moved.
motion to
Second.
have Frank Benetti to join us remotely.
so moved.
Moved by Kim, second by Janet Burson. Okay, roll call.
Trustee Muir,
Aye.
Trustee Boatner,
Aye.
Trustee Burson,
Aye.
and Trustee Hoppensberger.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay, motion passes. All right, we'll move on to public comments. I have Paul Mayer. Would you step up and, Nick, can you turn the microphone on for him?
It's on.
Or Kim?
It's
Yeah.
on. It's on.
Is it?
Yeah. You can hear me,
Okay,
right?
good, thank you.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay, here's a subject that I don't think has been mentioned much, at least not publicly, and I want to bring it up this evening. It's about TIFs, or TIFs. TIFs are financing plans, as you probably know, that supplement developers with tax revenues. These funds are used to restore blighted areas, okay, generally in urban settings, but more recently seem to be used to develop large areas of fertile, productive farmland. The money from the, quote, incremental tax revenues, unquote, is ceded to developers for development costs, thus reducing their expenses and increasing their profits. That's corporate welfare at the expense of the taxpayer and results in increased taxation of the general populace. Now, beware of anyone who may say to you, that's not true. But it is true. And let me give you an example of recent origin. According to the Tax Assessor's Office, last year, 2024, Kane County took in $1.76 billion in tax revenues. Now, in Kane County, again, according to the Tax Extension Office, there are 63 active TIF districts, from which, now get this, from which $554 million, or 31% of our total tax revenues, was set aside or siphoned from the general fund, which would be used for all of Kane County. That's 31% of your taxes went into TIFs in Kane County. Earlier this year, the Kane County Board seemed to be in a quandary about resolving their budget. Not enough money, of course, is always the excuse. So what happened a few weeks ago? The board passed for all of us to enjoy new taxes. We have a new gasoline tax, and they're extending the food tax, which was supposed to be, going out as of January 1st. So while our taxes are going up, there appears to be plenty of money from the county's general fund that could help satisfy county needs if TIF programs were used more frugally and appropriately and not as incentives for developers. If you approve TIF or TIF funding, I'm afraid you're becoming, probably unknowingly and in part, complicit with the many government leaders' continuous drive to increase the taxes both in our county and in our state. And if you're unfamiliar with TIFs and you want to know more about TIFs, see me after the meeting and I can put you in touch with somebody who is very, very knowledgeable, probably more knowledgeable than anybody sitting in this room here tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. All right, anybody else for public comment? Okay, hearing none, seeing none. We'll move on, and Mark?
Yeah, tonight, we're going to leave it to the board's discretion. Jim Brown is prepared to go over all of the various conditions that are in his findings of fact, each individually, or we can do it at the board's questions on any 1 through 24, or we can just do them all one at a time and discuss them with Jim giving an overview and then asking for questions. I'll leave it to the board's discretion on how they want to do it. Because you've all read the packet and everything, so.
I sort of prefer the overview and having him go through it. If it's something that we don't have questions on, you can move to the next one, but
Right.
we can go in order, overview.
Yeah, we can just go through them. We did make one change with Dave Petzelt this morning. There was some concern of residents at the public hearing, and trustees, I think, Therese, you had one. We added landscaping on that condition, and it's, Jim will cover that, the lots off Harley Road, the flag lots that are existing homes, there's 2. So on the new homes on both the south and the north side of their homes, we're going to add agreed landscaping in those backyards at the developers on construction of those homes. So there'll be added landscaping there, and then the lady that has the existing historic house, and she complained that she'd have 3 roads surrounding her property, essentially. The road into the townhomes, the developer has agreed not to place homes in that space. Dave, can you point with your finger on there? Her house is south, right there. There was room to put an additional set of townhomes in the 66-foot right-of-way between her house and the right-of-way. There's been an understanding agreement not to put any townhomes into that area, and the tree line will be totally preserved. That's along the north side of her property, on her property, and in that right-of-way area, and there'll be additional landscape shrubs and brush placed there. And then the landscaping along the very industrial south side of the railroad tracks, there's some very less than ideal uses there, but they're historic, and they'll stay. The landscaping does have some invasive species there, but to require the developer to remove it all would then expose existing homeowners and the historic as well as the new homes looking in on a very industrial, intense land use that's historically granted, and it will stay because it's not being annexed to the village. So they're going to just enhance some shrubbery added and keep. That's one place the invasive buckthorn, et cetera, will be allowed to stay. We wanted to make sure we point that out because we deemed it to be better than clearing it along that area. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's one I bring out because when we get to the landscaping plan, if you've got a different thought, you'll add it. But Jim, if you would, and then Carmen does have something to say about the number of years in the preliminary PUD, the 2 years, because of the phasing plan is not real clear right now, but we can address that in the final PUD, but Carmen can explain that better than I can.
I just want to give a general overview for the board and for the public as well as to where we are in the steps of review of this project. So the Planning and Zoning Commission approved a recommendation with conditions to the village board at the meeting, I believe last week, to recommend the approval of the special use for the preliminary PUD for this project. the PZC, or the Planning and Zoning Commission, prepared a list of somewhere around 20 conditions. Tonight's meeting is an opportunity for the village board for the first time to formally receive the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission, and to discuss the recommendation, to discuss the preliminary PUD that has been proposed, and the conditions and the findings of fact from the PZC. So all of that is included in the board packet that was presented to the village board and also presented to the public online. At this stage, there will eventually be an ordinance that is a PUD ordinance that, if the village board is willing to approve the preliminary PUD and the conditions. And just generally how that will look, it will just indicate that if you accept the findings of fact from the PZC, it will mirror what's in the staff report, and the findings of fact that the elements for a special use and the elements for a PUD have been met, and why they've been met. It will indicate, or it would indicate, that the PUD, the preliminary PUD, the preliminary plat, and all the attachments that came along with the application, such as the preliminary landscape plan, lighting plan, et cetera, are approved or accepted. So obviously, subject to any minor amendments that come through the village engineer and the developer. And will provide a framework for the time period for a final PUD application to be presented to the village engineer for review and consideration. So if the village board were to approve the preliminary PUD ordinance, it would essentially give the developer the green light to continue to move forward and to do his due diligence, or their due diligence, to continue engineering review, to negotiate the various infrastructure improvements and where they would be located, and with the Water Reclamation District that they've begun negotiations with, which is Mill Creek, to invest a considerable amount more into the project to get it to the point where they could apply for a final PUD approval, which has a lot more meat on the bones. It has a lot more of the the final drawings, let's say, for what this project's going to look like. That being said, a project of this size is going to be built in phases, and that's why you have at least a proposed phasing plan in the packet this evening that the PZC also reviewed. Pursuant to the zoning ordinance, the developer has 2 years from the approval of a preliminary PUD to submit an application for a final PUD. It doesn't mean that the final PUD has to be granted within those 2 years. It just says that the PUD would, the final PUD would have to be applied for. And that's subject to the village board's discretion if you wanted that to be extended, that initial application window. What would probably end up happening in a PUD ordinance from a preliminary standpoint, and probably from a final standpoint as well, is to have an indication that there will be phases to this project, that there will be further phases that will be reviewed by the village engineer, because when the final PUD is applied for, the developer may not know what his final phase of the project is going to look like down to the very last detail with regard to some items. So from a approval perspective, this matters before you now for discussion. It will come back at some point in the near future if the board wants to move it forward for action on that ordinance. If that ordinance is approved, the developer will continue to work on it on the planning stages of the project. That will be running a parallel track with the eligibility study through the village's retained TIF consultant, which if the property is deemed eligible, will then also involve a review of a redevelopment agreement between the village and the developer that will, as I think I've stated before, involve a review of the developer's projected costs or budget for the project as compared to the available increment that would be generated by the property when it's completely built out, and over the time when it's being built out, over those 23 years life of a TIF. that would likely be completed prior to final, that will be completed prior to final PUD being approved, because the developer is going to need to know what their anticipated costs are going to be, what, if any, increment is available to them for reimbursement, and if their reimbursements that they're seeking are eligible, that the village's TIF consultant will review. So,
And don't forget the step, you have to approve the request. It has to be eligible and available, but it's
Right,
still the board.
the village would approve, if a TIF was eligible, the property was eligible for the creation of a TIF, and the developer was asking for a redevelopment agreement, the village board would be the body that reviews and approves a redevelopment agreement. There was some discussion previously, I think I probably mentioned it too, about a PUD agreement, in addition to a PUD ordinance. That was not included in the list of conditions for the PZC, but that would be a recommendation, obviously, from the village attorney, that there be a condition on preliminary PUD that at the time of a final PUD application, a negotiated PUD agreement is presented for review and approval along, that has been reviewed by village staff, the village attorney, and that would be then approved by the village board as well. Because there are going to be monetary obligations between the parties within that agreement, calling out different things that are not, a little bit more complex than are included in a PUD ordinance. More along the lines of what you saw in the annexation agreement.
Financial terms.
Right. So at this point, I mean,
And I just think that we will try to finesse some language to acknowledge that the 2-year application is going to have a phasing aspect to it, because we know from talking with the developer that he plans on this lasting 20-plus years to build out the 900 units. So there'll be an obvious need to modify the 2-year final engineering plan, because he won't do final engineering on, say, the property south of the tracks and very far west in the first 2 years. We know that going in.
And-
So we just have to finesse that so you know that we are slightly modifying that PUD.
And the
requirement.
reason that's in the village code is, and it's very common in zoning ordinances, is so that a preliminary PUD is not approved, and then a project sits for years and years and years, and then a developer, or let's say a project that was assigned to another property owner, another developer, comes back and says, well, we'd like to apply for final PUD now, and it's been 10 years. So those sunset clauses are very common. Special uses have sunset clauses if permits aren't applied for.
Right.
In zoning ordinances all the time. Your zoning ordinance also has an expiration date on the issuance of permits after the final PUD is approved as well. I believe it's also 2 years. So that's to continue having a project move along as let's say, the condition of the property, the condition of the village board tends to be the same, or usually the same over that 2-year period, so that something can't be approved and then 5-10 years down the road, move forward with the next set of approvals.
So we just want to make sure you're understanding why we would modify that 2-year restriction, because of the length and the scope and size of this project. So Jim Brown, we will, your findings of fact, and go to the 20 conditions, starting with number 1. And that would be for those following along on page, where is that?
Well, I mean, you want me to, the findings of fact, I think, are pretty self-explanatory. I can go through the conditions.
Yeah, go through the conditions. I'm sorry, the conditions,
If you want me to look at the findings of fact, I can. but-
Carmen already touched on them, they've been met.
So, and I'll pick up right there. So the village attorney just explained this process. We're at the preliminary approval process, and it's very common that the preliminary approval comes with a list of conditions. We have about 2 dozen here, that's not uncommon. And again, as he kind of alluded to, is the reason for this is that now pretty much vests the rights, this approval, but there's still some things we want to see corrected in the final plan. So instead of making the developer go back and debating, going back and forth and revising plans, I'll go through these in order. I will not dive into them too much right now. If you have questions, thank you. If you have questions, you can, I guess, interrupt me.
We'll
I
stop
don't
you
really
before
care.
you go to the next
Yeah,
condition.
I don't, well, yeah, so, we may never get through that number 24 then, or 20, it's, I guess.
20.
But I would prefer if you just wait until the end, let me go through it, and maybe some of this will become a little clearer as I go through. So the first two are the ones that were really debated on by the Planning and Zoning Commission, the roadway widths. Our code says 30, the developer had proposed 28 feet, that's measured back of curb to back of curb. The village engineer advocated for at least some of the streets, the major streets running through the development, to be 30 feet. He was fine with some of the lesser streets being 28 feet. I was of a different opinion. Ultimately, the PZC went with really what the developer was proposing, and that was 28 feet throughout. All right. Street lighting was the other item that I think was, generated the most debate. The code would have required, 45, 50-plus lights. The developer had proposed originally 13 streetlights. I think most felt 13 was too few, and that the code requirement was too much. So then it became an issue of where are we going to land in here. I think in one of my staff memos, I had suggested 20 or 22 is kind of a starting point for discussion, and that was based on a very, very quick survey by me, trying to, just in my mind, mentally spacing out lights and intersections. And ultimately, the PZC decided to go less than that number. They came up 15 and 18, I think, was the total.
18.
Yeah, 18. And then the developer did submit a revised lighting plan that shows all the locations of those 18. I think those came in today. So we could attach that. If you're in agreement with that, we can attach that. And you're bringing it up now. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think that plan is
Yeah.
17 and
Yeah.
18 if the fire station is built and the second
Yeah.
means of egress, ingress is granted by KDOT
Yeah.
on Bunker, where
Okay.
the firehouse is. But it's 17 until the firehouse is built, and then an added light will be added to make 18 at that point. That was that back and forth debate that the PZC had.
So, traffic impact, there was a traffic impact study that was completed. And really, IDOT is going to have the final say on a lot of this. It was noted by.
KDOT.
KDOT, sorry. No wonder Carmen was giving me a funny look. KDOT will have a final say on this. And indeed, as was noted by Mr. Teat, one of the commissioners, who's a civil engineer himself, KDOT will sign off on the final plat as well. So really what this says is KDOT's going to have to buy off on the turning lanes. If there's any traffic devices they want, deaccelerations or lane or whatever, they'll have the final say. Engineering review comments, there was a
And
list.
Jim, just so the public knows, the road bunker is going to be constructed and built and opened before the developer, does any mass grading to even sell a first house. So
Yeah.
after the road has been built and driven on probably for 18 months, then there could be a KDOT requirement for the developer to build turn lanes or deceleration lanes, and the brand-new bunker road will get a third lane added, a large stretch of it. So it's not, KDOT can't stop their plans based on a development may happen. They have a road to be built, and they're gonna build it, and then make the developer adjust the road to their standards.
Item 4, condition 4, engineering review comments. We started out with a lengthy list of engineering review comments that got shorter. We got to the point where I think everyone was comfortable with approving the preliminary PUD, but those comments nonetheless need to be addressed, and that will be done prior to the approval of the final plat. Same thing with Kane County Stormwater Ordinance. They will have an opportunity to review, and all of their comments and changes and revisions will be addressed at final plat. When I say at final plat, I mean by the time we get to approving final plat, it'll all be straightened out. Landscape plan, I thought the landscape plan was pretty good, but there's a couple conditions here. Basically, actually, 6 and 7 go together. But there was some provisions to remove the invasive species, some buffering along certain segments of drives, and then the tree preservation plan and protection plan is part of that too, the purpose is to identify any trees that we think are worth preserving, and then there's protection measures to ensure that during construction and mass grading that their root system is not damaged and they survive. And then it's a kind of a lengthy condition, but just tells what has to be in the tree preservation plan.
Native plantings, too, is
Yeah,
what they
mhm,
recommend.
Yeah, the current plan is pretty heavy with
Native planting.
native trees, native understory, shrubs, grasses, so. And one of the PZC members, commissioners, suggested that the cul-de-sacs, those bulbs in the cul-de-sac should be outlots and be the responsibility of the homeowners association. So that is a condition here, too. Phasing plan, Carmen talked about that. All developments have a phasing plan, particularly something like this, 900 acres, 450 acres being developed, 900 homes. So that's, again, is a condition of the final. Roadway centerline radii, this is number 10. This is more an acknowledgement than a condition. We're just kind of saying that some of these things don't quite meet our code, and everyone is basically okay with it. All right. Townhouse, I'm on 11 now, town home access aisle widths. This generated a certain amount of debate. The issue here is between the townhouses that are back to back. So the backs of the townhomes face each other. It's where the garage doors are. So there's a drive aisle, and then there's kind of parking spaces, and then they go into their garages. Our code requires the aisle to be 24 feet. Yeah, I think the plan was submitted at 20 feet. The PCC looked at a couple options. Scott and I discussed this, a few ideas. We could have kept, we could have kept the parking spaces to 20 feet, we could have gone down to 18 feet, and then adjusted the aisle accordingly. But ultimately, what they decided on was to stick with our standard and that the aisle width should be 24 feet. And then the parking stalls would be 18 feet, those parking stalls in front of the townhouse doors. Number 12, the Metra had sent us a letter requesting that a path be installed, particularly from the townhouse area to any place on their property. They said they'd take over from there. A pedestrian path is more or less, at least a portion of it, you could call a TOD, transit-oriented development. And the developer readily agreed to that. The path was put in, then the question arose, well, it should be illuminated as well. Some debate here on the type of lighting, whether this path, which is going to be near the townhouses, whether the lighting, the illumination would be too intrusive for the residents there. PCC decided on bollards, something about 3.5 feet high, and that the illumination should just be facing the path. It'd be going out, it wouldn't be towards the direction of the residents. Bunker Road pedestrian path. Scott, if you want to chime in here, any place on these upcoming ones, please do. Now we're getting, I think, heavier into some engineering things. Got to read this, can't remember what it was. Oh, it was for, if I remember correctly, this was for, oh God, I can't remember now. This was for the path under Bunker Road, or the underpass there.
Adding a sidewalk.
You were adding a sidewalk.
Around
Yeah.
the roundabout.
Right, and it was to connect the north and south sections of the development is why we wanted this put in. And,
I think the catch-all
Yeah.
to that, if
idea.
practicable
Right.
and engineeringly possible to add it with the road width and the underpass has the bulk work for the bridge to keep the train running across it. There may not be enough space
Right.
under the underpass itself to have a sidewalk. There was some grade elevation. So it was, if engineering and practicable, to be constructed, right, Scott?
Right, and this is, again, a KDOT final approval on this.
Because it's their land.
It's their right-of-way, it's their land. The last sentence of this condition, though, is probably the most important thing. The developer shall post a financial guarantee for the completion of the path, and then if we know it's never going to come, if never going to happen, then they would get that financial guarantee back, or it'd be released. Shared use paths, there were some certain areas that that Scott Markworth, the village engineer, thought should be widened, and this will be evaluated in consultation with the village engineer and the applicant prior to time of the approval of the final plat. Side yard drainage, can't remember what Scott, help me here, can't remember what this one was. Final engineering? Yeah. Yeah, the reduction or elimination of side yard drainage outlets as currently shown in preliminary engineering plan shall not be permitted. So there you go.
Scott, go ahead and add.
Yeah.
There was-
I'll
yeah.
add,
Yeah,
I'll add
please.
briefly to that. Code requirement, as currently written, doesn't allow drainage from streets out through private property through side yards, which is not the most practical design. It's been designed to minimize those. Most of that goes out through side yard outlots between lots. But there's still a few locations where single set of drainage inlets to go to a main storm sewer in the rear yard. We don't have an issue with that. But you don't want to have a 100-year overflow in a side yard of homes, but a minor storm sewer, there's some locations that we feel will be acceptable to do.
That wouldn't cause a long-term plan problem for the village or the homeowner with an easement that has a large amount of water on a regular basis flowing across it.
Or a very large storm sewer between two homes. You don't
Yes.
want that, you want more space.
So if it has 20, 30 years later, if there's failure, you have to repair it, you don't want to tear up somebody's side yard.
Number 18, the anti-monotony standards.
16.
There's typically concern for a development of this size with the single-family homes that they'll all end up looking alike. People throw out phrases like cookie-cutter subdivisions and cookie-cutter look. So this is meant to prevent that. I will say the townhouse component, those townhouses are probably going to be very, very similar. So this is aimed more at the single-family residences. I can go into detail on this. Just very briefly, these standards present a palette of options. I think there's 5 options, and they have to change 2 of those, and each of those options has about 3 or 4 different things that they can change. So I think they have to fulfill 2 of the 5, and that gets to the point where the houses would look generally different or not alike. I can talk about this forever. Don't get me started on this one. So,
Well,
yeah,
and so
that's
can
all- that's all-
Dave,
yeah,
if you
that's all
want
I'll say
to, if you
for
want
now.
to hear how Dave can modify
yeah, that's,
each
yeah,
style
that-
house
yeah.
5 ways.
Oh, yeah, and to me, that's fine. I mean,
It's a good
so,
thing.
17,
Yeah.
18, and 19, I'll cover these together. They all have to do with an SSA.
SSA.
So typically, for developments, there's an HOA established, and the HOA is responsible for the maintenance of certain common areas, and that's the case here. However, HOAs do fail, go bankrupt, disappear, lack of leadership, whatever, and the common areas then are not maintained. So an SSA, sometimes referred to as a dormant SSA, is established at time of final plat normally, and then it remains dormant until the point when that HOA is not fulfilling its obligations to maintain those common areas. People.
For the repair, maintenance of the streets and stormwater. That's an active SSA.
So there's an active one.
So
Okay.
that active SSA is a condition as well, but it was in the annexation agreement, so we'd add, Carmen and I made sure that that's active SSA is requirement. We could put it in the preliminary, but it's in the annexation agreement, so you're covered. I think that we do have Drew, who serves with the Historic Kane County Preservation Council. If you could just give them a flavor for what you're going to do tomorrow, and Jody, or not Jody, Julia Thong, that's the
Thong.
Thong. But I can never say her name right. Say it for us, for the record.
Julia Tavong
Tavong.
is the director of the Historic Plan Commission. So she's a full-time employee at the county. The county has a Historic Plan Commission, and in this particular circumstance, they oversee two things. They oversee the historic district in the downtown area of LaFox, and they also oversee the rustic road designation of Brundage Road. So they have two irons in the fire on this particular project. So one of the requests from the neighborhood was to put streetlights in the historic district. And so what we're going to talk about tomorrow is the type and style of those lights. It's ultimately the decision of the Historic Plan Commission. So we're going to bring them some input we had from the residents and have a discussion on that tomorrow night.
And it's 3 or 4 that they're going to add, right?
3 plus the ones that will be going in at the cross streets.
Yeah. But,
So a total of about 6 of something that will look somewhat different than the rest of the lights in the subdivision, maybe a little bit more old-timey or historic looking.
and the developer's agreeing to do that even though it's outside the village annexed properties as just a gift, I would say, from the developer to play nice with the historic preservation.
We think of it as a demand by the, but yeah, it's all been very friendly, and hopefully we'll have an answer tomorrow night.
Thanks, Drew.
And I know there's been some question, Jim, I think that the comp plan, even though we're gonna have the public hearing on approving it at this level, we did have the conservation. If you could explain that again, so it's on the record for the public if they ever tune in, of why we have the conservation design concept. The 960 acres is .93, but if you look at it from developable land, it's subtract out the parks or any open space streets and stuff, you get, instead of .93 homes per acre, you get 2.2, or, you did the numbers.
Well, okay, so,
There's a lot of ways to
yeah,
look at
there's
it.
different ways to look at it, and people, right, preserve, but you also lower infrastructure and maintenance costs, because you're taking those 1 acre lots, let's say we cut those in half, now they're a half acre, so now you have 100 homes on 50 acres. That leaves 50 acres that you can preserve as open space, a park, ball field, whatever you want to call open space, forest preserve in this case, is a lot of it. And you cluster the homes, and that reduces your streets, your number of streetlights, sewer lines, water lines, all that maintenance. The initial installation and maintenance is also reduced. So there's a lot of benefits to this. And we can argue about density. I mean, some people, I still see it as the kind of the gross density is you still have a 100 acre development and you have 100 homes. So to me, it's an acre, one home per acre. Some people would say, no, that's not true. You're only developing 50 acres, so it's double that. But I take it as the bigger picture because that's the purpose of it. There's a lot of community benefits to this.
And this project especially lent itself for a
It does.
conservation design, because one of the key elements of doing this development was to preserve this large swath
Right.
of pristine farmland and cane, open space, and it's all contained together along with the waterway of the Mill Creek. So you've got a very pristine collection of 440 acres plus some 38 that'll go to a organic farm on Brundage. So basically, everything north of the Mill Creek waterway system will be preserved, and then the development density, and it reduces and makes your affordability and long-term maintenance of the infrastructure easier. But it's just a good land tool for preservation and the livability of the semi-rural nature of this region. So we thought that that was important to put in the comp plan to be our guiding light, and it fit very well on this piece of 960 acres.
Right.
So,
And, you know, when you take a look at this plan, I'll just note this. Well over half of these lots here are going to back up to open space. I mean, most of those are backing up to open space. So you still have, you know, maybe from some of those streets in there, it doesn't look like a typical, you know, rural area in Campton Hills, but if you're living on one of the lots to the outside, then you still have, you're backing up to a forest preserve or a farm field or something else. You're backing up to open space.
so who, I guess, President Wojcicki,
Yeah.
if you're going to start right or left and ask for questions.
Yeah. Questions or comments about James's presentation or anything up on the screens or anything for Dave Patzelt?
Or Scott.
Or Scott?
Do you want to start with Kim first? Or
Sure.
just be organized.
All right, I guess my question is for Scott. I think you had some concern about the lighting and not having enough. Did I read that correctly in the packet?
You did, and to explain that, first of all, I have no issues with, and none of this is personal, this is just make sure that you're looking at this in accordance with the rules that exist. You have some widely varying conditions in the village. Much of the village was developed unincorporated, had 0 streetlights in most of the subdivisions. Then the urban section, neighborhoods Fox Creek, Fox Mill came in with quite a bit of street lighting. Globe lighting, intersections, mid-block, et cetera. And it appears like after that, there was the, hey, that's a little bit much. So the village implemented a dark sky ordinance to manage future development. Since that ordinance, which I think was 2014, there's been one subdivision built in the village that generally complies with the dark sky requirements. And there should be an exhibit in the packet that describes Norton Lakes overlaid in comparison to LaFox. So a couple things to keep in mind is each intersection in Norton Lakes does have a street light. Okay, there is an error in the exhibit. I thought there were 5 intersections, 5 street lights in Norton Lakes. There's actually 6 because there's one at the end so there are 6 lights in a dark sky compliant neighborhood of 100 and some homes.
109.
Whoever's driving this, can you get to the one exhibit? I think it's, I don't know, probably page 310, 320 in the packet. Oh, you cannot? Okay.
Just, everybody's got their computers open. If
It's
you
in
go
your
to that.
packet. Okay, so to better illustrate that, we overlaid the layout to scale of Norton Lakes, number of lights, on 3 different parts of the LaFox subdivision to show what similar layout to your only dark sky compliant neighborhood would look like. And with 5 or 6 lights in each of those neighborhoods, that's came up to 15 to 18, plus the 6 that are required. Still gets it in the lower 20s range. And several neighborhoods without any lights with that comparison. So the LaFox subdivision is almost 1.5 miles wide at its longest dimension. So this is a very large stretch that these lights are being spread out among. The village code requirement does allow for a light at each intersection, and the dark sky, and a couple other conditions, and the dark sky section says lights shall only be at intersections unless adjusted by a PUD or variance and such. So that's the reason the information is in here as to why potentially 44 lights, is that's actually what the dark sky code would allow. I just want to make sure that everybody's looking at it in the context of what could be allowed versus the density versus the size of the subdivision in order to make the correct informed decision of how many lights should go in the subdivision.
And that was the debate. They had 40, and they went with dark sky and the semi-rural nature, why they reduced it to 18. After, that probably had the longest debate. I know Kim was there.
I was there, yeah. Yeah. I just, was just going, like I said, I just wanted to hear your take on it, because I really couldn't hear when you were talking about it with the commissioners, because of where I was sitting. But
Sure.
I just wanted to make sure that we're not undercutting it, but we're not overdoing it either.
And one other item that is noted is a street light at each intersection does provide illumination of your street signs.
True.
Okay, if you do not have a street light at each intersection, and these do put out a small pool of light, you're not seeing that at one intersection from lighting at another. So that's another factor that I think, because actually the way Norton Lakes is designed is the street signs are mounted on the street light poles. They're directly illuminated by it as you drive through. Oh, there's an intersection coming up. But that's pretty much the extent of street lighting, those pools that you see.
And you would say that perhaps that that lighting is going to be downward facing?
Oh,
That is
yeah,
a requirement of the dark sky
All right.
lighting.
We'll get
So,
some
and-
lighting from the metro station as well, right?
Pardon?
We get lighting from the metro station as well?
You do get,
Some light?
you do
We
get
have
some
to take that.
spillover. Much of the development that has occurred around here is not dark sky compliant. So you want, the pendulum, nothing too dense with globes, back to dark sky, make you looking at it
Yeah.
in the context of what the dark sky, I think, was intended for.
Okay. Any other questions for Scott? Anybody have questions for Scott while he's up there? No? No?
If
Go
I
ahead.
could
Sure.
add to a couple items. I think I'm going to actually start backwards. Number 20, financial guarantees. Everyone wants a development to succeed. No community wants to go into a development, no developer wants to go into a development looking for things to happen. Those of us that have been around for decades have been through markets, ups and downs, and the type of security that the village accepts is, if anything goes wrong, is very important. Administratively friendly to a community when you have to obtain those funds after, development's gone under to complete improvements. So that's something that I would suggest you consider revising the language in here to require letter of credit only for your long-term protection. I think the other, the shared use paths item. The reason that some potential future widening area, those run through open space areas behind homes where storm sewer is going to be, because the village, through the active SSA, will ultimately be responsible for storm sewer maintenance in those areas. Some paths for vehicle maintenance might be desired to be a little wider than the standard 8-foot. Not all of them, but in some particular areas. That's why I leave that condition opened as we get further into design to discuss that. The roadway width, again, had been a fair amount of debate back and forth. The concern is of narrowing too much versus, for speed control versus traffic amounts. There are a couple of streets in this neighborhood where, because of the minimal number of entrances, where there's going to be a little higher traffic volumes. In particular, to the west of Bunker Road and in here, eastern portion is about 380 homes that come in through two entrances. That's going to generate probably 3,500 vehicle trips per day. The way it's set up, we think probably 3/4 of that is going to come in at one entrance. So now you're looking at 2,500 to 3,000 vehicles on that one roadway, spread out over a 24-hour period. Would a little extra pavement width help? That's why we did not suggest reducing everything to the 28, keep some of the more major roadways a little bit wider, and the same similar type concern on the west side.
How much wider?
Well, your code shows with no parking, 30 foot back to back.
30.
It actually shows wider than that with parking on one lane, on one side. If you're at 30 foot back to back, you're basically 27, 28 foot paved surface edge to edge. If you park a vehicle on one side, 6 to 7 feet, you're left with 10 to or so feet of travel lane for 2 lanes of direction. Which nobody knows how many vehicles we parked out there. Just a little extra pavement does leave some options open. So that was a reason for the debate back and forth on that particular item.
Oh, Therese, go ahead.
So I just want to clarify, so it looks like the P and Z Commission recommended 28 feet everywhere. So, and you're saying we might want to consider widening the areas, the entrances and the exits, just those areas?
Yes, the exhibit that was given to the PZC did have some of the side streets that are only going to see traffic on the side streets, not through streets. Those areas didn't see it much of a concern with narrowing the pavement widths, but did have the concern on the major roadways. So the cul-de-sacs, the
828.
new road like this, it's only going to see traffic that lives in that area. But these roadways are going to see traffic from here, and through there. So they're going to see appreciably more than some of the minor areas.
So do you have an exhibit that shows which roadways you would recommend widening, or how far down the road, or how far down the entrance you would recommend? And
There was an exhibit in the PZC packet.
Okay.
That have highlighted roadways that maybe could consider narrowing.
Okay, and then I'm assuming, Jim, you guys took that into consideration though also? What he mentioned, so we could always ask you later about why you decided to not make those areas wider.
Yeah, and I'll say Scott and I disagree on this.
Got it, okay, so I'm just
Hear what
curious.
Dave has to say.
So there is an exhibit though that I can look at? Yes, there is an exhibit I can look at in the old packet that shows where you would have recommended wider
In the Plan Commission packet,
Plan Commission packet.
there was
Okay.
an exhibit prepared by H.R. Green that had indications of where they thought that the 30-foot wide pavement may be
Might be a-
necessary.
Okay,
And the
However-
PZC took that under
Right.
advisement, saw Jim's counterpoint and my counterpoint of speed and enforcement, that we have in this village on some through streets that are, people go too fast and people complain all the time. So that, and the 28 feet or 26 does have a very much of a calming lowering of how fast people will drive. So that was the compromise at 28. Jim and I thought some of the areas could be 26s
Oh,
because
got
we'd
it,
slow
okay.
it down.
That's really.
So maybe we
the
can-
28 was
okay.
a standard, so it's easy to apply
Yeah.
across the entirety of the subdivision.
But Scott, you still feel differently about that? You still recommend? So we,
Do you want to jump
Have
in
a
on
difference
the
there.
street width?
You do have some neighborhoods
Uh,
and
I think Janet was
subdivisions that
next.
do have.
Well,
Go ahead.
Frank,
Go ahead.
Frank has a question, as long as Scott is still up there. Go ahead.
Yeah, so at the last meeting, you may have covered this because it's kind of hard to hear, but weren't they talking about restricting parking to just one side?
Yes.
And wouldn't that help alleviate some of the issue with the road width?
Yeah, he's right.
Yes, that was the PZC recommendation, which was 28-foot back-to-back with parking on one side only
That is the condition that you've got before you as a,
Yeah.
from the PZC.
from the
yes.
PZC.
So I guess my question is, wouldn't that alleviate some of the concerns about the width of the roads?
Yeah, if one side, 28 feet does work with one side parking. It's all across the Chicago suburbs in America, really. Mike, can you weigh in on that?
Correct.
Mike says that's correct.
If I could further add that the traffic engineer that had studied the subdivision and car counts did not find any warrants or necessary to increase the roadway width to the 30 feet. And it's a concern of ours that the speed is really a problem in neighborhoods such as this. And how do you control the speed? And then at one point, there was discussion with HR Green. They said, well, one way to do it is start adding knuckles that you may see in other downtown communities where to reduce the speed, they're bringing knuckles out, which then the knuckles become more difficult for drivers to see the knuckle, snow plowing to get the snow out of the knuckle, and maintaining those knuckles. And in our opinion, knuckles are installed when it's too late, when the road is too wide, and you're trying to solve a problem by reducing the road, rather than pulling the entire road in.
I like
You go around to the corners and start introducing knuckles.
what,
Knuckles.
what is
Speed
the,
bumps.
what is the width of the roads in Norton Lakes?
Norton Glen coming off of Route 64 is 30.
I can't,
I believe Walt Whitman
well, Teresa's
is
just
30.
finishing.
I'm still on the same topic, though, so I'm on the same topic. I didn't
Yeah.
take a new topic, so I'm just getting
Go
all
ahead-
the
go
answers to
ahead,
this one.
Scott. Yeah.
I believe Norton Glen coming off of Route 64 is 30.
Okay.
I believe a section of Walt Whitman is, because it connects to a street built in Fox Mill that was wider. So there are some streets in Fox Mill 30. I believe the other roadways in Norton Lakes are 28.
And the difference is there, they did consider that, is you check in on LaFox and you can go all the way through to 64 on that one street that is wider.
You're connecting.
They're connecting two major roads, whereas this, there is no connecting to Brundage or Harley. You go in and you come back out.
Okay. Go
Okay.
ahead, Janet.
Thank you.
Most of the roads in the village are substantially narrower than this. We have roads that are 20 feet wide, we have roads that are 24 feet wide, so 30 feet wide, I mean, this is a freaking highway compared to what people are used to in the village. My understanding is that there is a bit of a tension between the recommendations of the engineering community and the engineering of the planning community. Neither one is necessarily particularly right or wrong, but there's a tension that the planners would like to see narrower roads and the engineers would like to see wider roads. As a resident who lives on a road that I don't think is 24 feet wide, 28 seems plenty wide to me. And when we're talking about parking, whether parking is on two sides of the road or one side of the road, 2 feet obviously doesn't make any difference. The car is way wider than that. So this is just a question of perception as you're driving down the road. If I'm driving down the road and there's 3 or 4 cars over here and there's 1 or 2 over there, well, I might feel like, well, that's a little bit more of a navigation. I have to slow down more. Yay,
Yeah.
good, right? Because we don't want you driving really fast down that road. The cars actually provide the knuckle. It, you know, it seems to me that 28 feet is, again, it's well more than what is standard in the village. And our planner seems to be happy with it. I don't see how widening it to 30 feet would facilitate, you know, additional parking or anything. And I'm really convinced by the notion that the narrower streets reduce speed and keep the neighborhood safer. The related notion, which I would like to hear a little more about, but as we get down onto this, has to do with radius at some of these intersections, which I'm concerned about, as I think most people are, only when it comes to, you know, fire trucks and other emergency equipment.
And it's in the KLOA study, they're compliant.
Right. You know, so I'm a fan of the narrower roadway.
And I would like to add, yes, there is a difference of opinion between planners and engineers, which is not uncommon. I wanted to make sure you understood what your code called for. Ideas of maybe where to bring it down and narrower. Ultimately, if the decision is, 28-foot back-to-back everywhere, then we'll go with that. We just want to make sure, there was a good discussion about code versus where it's at now.
I have one
Go
additional
ahead.
thought. There is a value, I think, to driving into an area, having the roadway be a little wider at first, and then narrow. As someone comes in, first they feel that they have a little room, and then they sense that narrowing.
Housings, 2 outbound lanes on each, or two inbound lanes on each.
And Bunker is going to be a much faster speed.
And it's
And
a
then
through, it's a
than
through
LaFox
street,
will.
yeah.
And then they narrow down to the 28
Yeah.
within the neighborhood.
Whereas LaFox, when it's eventually turned over, it will not be a through street in all likelihood. The KLOA study does show that the Union Pacific will probably be successful in putting a stop. So you will have LaFox at a slower speed, so when they turn in off that, they won't need to be as wide as they will on Bunker, and that's already been established.
All right, Mike, go ahead.
Procedural question first then. Are we gonna, like, item 1 go around the table, item 2 go around the table, item 3 go around the table, or are we gonna try to tick them
We just
off?
tried to have everybody address the engineering questions while Scott was up there, and then we were going to
No,
just,
we'll go back to James, yeah.
Okay, so that's gonna be, there's a lot of them that are engineering questions.
they haven't been asked. He's
Okay.
standing there.
Well, okay, all right.
Comes from an engineer there.
Okay, so 28-foot back-to-back is 25 feet of asphalt. 30 back-to-back is 27 feet of asphalt, so it's 2 feet difference of what people have a perception of what they're driving on. It's already narrow. 27 feet of asphalt's already narrow-ish, especially allowing parking on it. So, I mean, traditionally, it's 2 10-foot driving lanes, 1 8-foot parking lane. You shave 2 more feet off, so you got 2 9-foot driving lanes, 1 8-foot parking lane.
Parking just on one side of the
Parking
street.
on, you prohibit parking already on the side where there's a bunch of fire hydrants anyway, because it makes it easier for everybody. And then to the point you answered already, as we get closer to the decision points, coming out to the new Bunker, we're gonna have turn lanes, so they're already gonna be wider there. Scott, you showed that part between, I don't know which 2 subsections are, but going across the section line there. Yeah, the one to your left. you were pointing on that one, right? That one there? You're worried about that one? We can prohibit parking in that section on both sides as an option if we're looking about, you know, not want, well, you can stay, yeah, you can stay at 28 and prohibit parking on both sides there. Just knowing that it's a connection road between those two settlement areas, two subdivisions. There's no how, correct. So if we're talking about that, I'm in favor of 28 feet. Street lighting, I'll go on record as saying I think it's not enough street lighting. I think there should be a street light at every intersection. We have downcasting lights as our standard nowadays. That was to immediately get away from all the globe lighting that's all over the place in the other subdivisions. So if we end up with a lesser number, fine, but I read through that, I read the deliberation from the Plan Commission, I respect a lot of it, but I'm thinking we should still have streetlights at every subdivision, or every intersection. Let's see, engineering review comments, stormwater ordinance, I think we're good on, didn't have anything questions for that. Tree survey looks very good, didn't have anything on that. Outlots and cul-de-sacs, that's good. Center line radii, okay, I read through that. The district's already looked at this. They're fine with it, so I would say noted when they make those recommendations. Townhome access outlets, I read through it, that's good. Then the only other question I think that would be engineering related is, okay, so the, walk me through if anybody knows why, I shouldn't say it that way. Well, let me ask it in a simplistic way. Why do we need UP's permission to put a path underneath their train tracks on the viaduct?
I'll address it, Dave, and you can give the counterpoint. It isn't necessarily UP permission.
Okay.
It's KDOT permission.
Well, that's fine, then that's what I expect, it's the right of way.
There's a restricted space between the bridge piers
Mm-hmm.
and grade changes and such,
Okay.
and ditches and shoulders and guardrail and such. And there's two potential options to get a path under the bridge. One is between the pier and the roadway, and another, slightly more challenging option, is on the upper side of the pier, between the pier and the abutment, which would put it several feet above the roadway. But also a lot of the ground north and south of there is higher as well, up near the right-of-way line type of stuff.
Right,
Neither will be easy, but it was mentioned, it came up as there's currently without that, no pedestrian connection between the north and south side of the subdivision. So the idea came up, Mr. Patzelt had mentioned, pretty much, sure, if it's feasible,
okay.
we'll include it. So it's too early in the stage to go through the detailed engineering to determine if it's feasible, but the option listed in here provides for it, if it can be done, for it to be done.
But really, for clarifications, it's KDOT.
Correct.
Okay, that's all.
Anything different, Dave?
Yeah, Mike, if I could add to that, so the area that we're talking about is this, between these two areas. Keep in mind that we don't own any of that land, either east side or west side of Bumpkin Road. So, sure, if KDOT allows it, and it can be in the right of way.
Yep.
And at grade, we have no problem.
And you guys just commit to throwing some cash at it?
Exactly.
Yep, okay.
Issue comes in, though, is typically you either need more right-of-way,
Mhm.
or you need to put the sidewalk on private property
Mhm.
outside the right-of-way. When we don't own it, we can't put that.
Fair enough.
Put there.
Okay.
Okay, let's see, Kim, are you done with your questioning?
Or you just did engineering, did you have others?
Yeah,
So Scott, I think you can
unless-
relax for a minute.
yeah.
I really don't think I can pretty much understand, I don't think I have much other way of questions, something might pop.
Okay, you let us,
My bigger thing was widening our discussion about the road width and everything, great.
okay, we'll move on till Nick. Anything?
Thanks. I have some thoughts and questions about the conditions, but while the map is up, Dave, this would probably be directed at you. Originally, your first presentation, you had spoken about I think it was called the Emerald Necklace, the space around historic downtown LaFox. And I think it was like 200 feet. And when I was looking at the landscape plan behind historic LaFox, it was green space, but it was really sparsely planted. And then on the north end, like between Dillon Field and the neighborhood, it was planted pretty densely with like a prairie. There was a lot of effort put into the density of the plantings. And I was just curious, it almost looked like even the townhouses could be shifted west some, like it was the same amount of distance between Bunker and behind historic LaFox, the houses. If I need to point it out, I could. I don't know the microphone, but. Yeah, I'm talking about this space right here looks to be about equal to this space. And in an effort to give these folks the biggest and best buffer, it almost seems like we could eat up some of this space, push these closer to Bunker, but more attention paid to creating a barrier, like a real privacy. So right now, it's really just, it's grass. But when you looked up in this area, there was a ton of attention paid to it. There's prairie, there's, it was real dense. But I was just concerned that this emerald necklace seemed to actually not exist. It kind of got cut off. And I just wanted to know if you could address, or, if we need to brainstorm and come up with a solution, but I don't think that that's adequate for these residents right now. It wasn't what I was expecting, so I didn't know if you could talk about that.
So, I believe this is, Drew, the Emerald Necklace is 100.
200 at Dillonville.
Correct.
200.
So that's the significant difference.
Okay.
This 100-foot Emerald Necklace, we actually had a couple different plans for this area. And those plans were presented to the residents down in that area. And this was the plan that those residents selected, that they preferred to have. So,
Okay.
I believe that those residents are satisfied or happy with how this plan turned out.
Okay.
So, I have not heard of any objections from, after presenting this to them, or a couple plans, that they're satisfied with it. And I guess I would, has the Fox Civic Organization or the Historic District heard of any concerns or complaints about that Emerald Necklace?
Because this is really the time to talk about it. Right now, it's 100 feet, and it's going to be the row of townhouses. It's a simple landscaping adjustment right now. But this was reviewed, and everybody,
Yeah.
green light, thumbs up?
Over the last year, I've talked about the neighborhood meetings we had. Actually, most of them were at my house. And the historic district came to my house, and Shodine provided two options. I can't see it from here. The neighborhood to the east.
Kind of 50% greater than Spire. So I believe there's been a lot of attention given to the landscaping in addition to the quantity of the landscaping going in.
And
Yeah,
Dave,
thank you for
Dave,
adding.
wasn't there one resident that actually asked about leaving some of the existing undesirable stuff? And they said they would, as much as the,
As long as for drainage purposes
yeah.
and utility purposes, we will leave it.
Okay. Great. That's all I needed to hear on that. I'm going to move on to condition 1 and condition 2 and just give my feedback on those. Condition 1, which these were the big topics of discussion during the previous hearings. I felt like the 28-foot roads were still very wide roads. two 10-foot driving lanes and an 8-foot parking lane. I like the look of a narrower street. You know, personally, it's a quaint, rural streetscape versus large, wide urban boulevards or parkways. I thought narrower streets are going to blend in more with LaFox and Campton Hills, rural and LaFox's historic feel. The narrower streets, I'm not an engineer, but it would make me think that they would encourage slower driving speeds in a residential neighborhood, which is definitely a positive. But the biggest thing for me with minimizing the amount of paved surface is that we are minimizing runoff. We're encouraging more infiltration. We have all of these existing residents that are on well and septic and are very conscientious of that. And I think the more water that we get back into the dirt, the better off we are. Lights, the street lights, I was okay with the 13, and it had nothing to do with safety. This was just me living in Campton Hills and enjoying turning on a dark street and driving home. I think that's a lot of the charm. You're all done driving home from the city, you get out to Campton Hills and it's dark and you can appreciate it. It's a little mysterious. I think it's beautiful. Now, both of these two conditions, though, the fact is it's also a matter of economy for the developer, and if we were to reduce the street width or reduce the number of required street lights, there is savings in the development. And one condition that I would propose that we add would be some developer subsidized water and sewer taps for the homes that are adjacent to this development. We've had significant public comment and feedback about concerns about septic systems that could fail. We don't know how those were installed originally. Wells, folks are concerned that there could be any unforeseen reason why their groundwater is compromised. I think a really smart condition for both the Village of Campton Hills and the developer to show these residents how conscientious we are of their situation would be to subsidize over a certain dollar per foot these water and sewer taps. I put in fairly great detail a condition which, Jim, I don't know if you sent that to everybody. I didn't know if everybody was blind copied on that email. No. But I could go into more detail, but the general thought would be that through this development, it would be a fixed cost not to exceed, say, $25 a linear foot. Anything above and beyond that, the developer would take care of. Homeowners would contract with the developer to have their water and sewer meter to tap. So I'd like to get everybody's feedback on that. And I could go into more detail, but generally, kind of that would be the idea.
I think you're missing a great opportunity that we are giving those residents, which is bringing sewer and water close to their city block to where they could connect. So if they had to run a pipe today all the way from, I'll say, historic LaFox, all the way back to the Mill Creek Water Reclamation District back in Mill Creek, they would never be able to afford it. Typically, a developer, when he extends utilities to an area, he's entitled to a recapture agreement. And that recapture agreement would then be billed to anybody that connects for a percentage of that pipe all the way back to the sanitary district. So I believe that we have not asked for that, so we are bringing them availability of the utility and not charging them for that recapture clause. The sanitary district has their connection fee, and that connection fee needs to be paid, and I don't believe that this developer should be responsible for, if you wanted to connect to the sewer system, to be paying your impact or connection fee to that system. Today, if their system fails today, they're going to have to do something about a septic system and/or drill a new well, and they're going to have a significant cost. In the future, when we bring that utility close by, if they have a failure, they can then weigh that cost of putting that well in and a new septic and/or a new septic, and see if they want to pay that price, or they want to pay the price to extend, the pipe in front of their property to the main, where the main is at. So I believe we're bringing a great opportunity and I'll say a gift to those residents. They'll have their own choice. They can do whatever they desire. It best meets their needs. I think going too far of a gift is really somewhat uncalled for.
And Dave, I think if you could show on the map where the utility lines will be available for them to reach.
Sure. It's easier on the black and white, but in essence, this intersection and this intersection will be the utility, and in essence, these residents would then need to connect at either end. And similarly, down here, the utility will be at this intersection. They can either head north or they could head south to that intersection.
Trustee Mike, do you want to jump in there for a
I
moment?
was thinking, I mean, there's precedent. Fox Mill did this for the farmstead. Maybe and it might be a level of detail that might be tricky at this point. But I think we can make the condition more about extending a lateral, or extending a trunk. If you've got one there, I'm looking at it from here, this is me doing it, to make sure that the future stub or a future connection by one of those folks would be easier to facilitate. So stubbing out, allowing for a larger manhole instead of just a 4-footer, put a 5-footer in there or something like that. That would facilitate a future connection. I think, and no, we're just looking at those 4 spots right there. I think those are the ones, right? That's what we're talking about, Nick, is pretty much Old Fox.
Old historical
Right.
Fox,
Yeah.
yeah.
Historic, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's something to work on engineering detail.
Yeah, absolutely. We
Okay.
have agreed to provide a valve vault with a T
Yeah.
for that, in essence, pointing north or pointing south right at the intersection with LaFox that then somebody just simply ties onto. So, again, that, in my opinion, we're saving them quite a bit of money, and being quite gracious, I would say, in allowing the capacity to be there for their connection in the utility, in the plant.
Yeah, and Dave, just so you better, or not better understand, but to explain my thought process a little bit better, if we were to, say, 28-foot roads and 13 streetlights, 18 streetlights, that's a fixed savings for you. That money, that's a for sure.
Sure, when you compare the 28 to 30.
To 30, yeah, or
I
the
can tell you that the
13
Mill
to
Creek-
52.
Mill
Yeah.
Creek, we objected to the 28. Mill Creek development was done with 24. We believe that the narrower roads slow the traffic. Blackberry Township approved 24, no parking restrictions. They had the right to invoke parking restrictions in the event there was a problem. In over 20 years, there's never been a parking problem. They've never had to restrict parking anywhere. So going from 24 to 28 is a significant price cost increase to us. The streetlights, again, not so much of a cost for the streetlights, but it is, we agree, again, in Mill Creek, there are very few streetlights. And it wasn't a cost thing, it was trying to be between Dark Sky Initiative and, as you so eloquently described, coming home into a darker neighborhood. It's beautiful, it's quiet, and it's very mystique, if you would, as you're driving through. So that's why we believe there should be less lights.
And how many houses in Mill Creek again?
There's, about 2,000 homes. The other thing that on all of the homes, they have lights, front porch lights, and 2 lights on the garage. So the idea there is that when you're home or you're expecting guests, you turn your lights on, and people will drive towards where the light is, knowing that that's where that's the destination. So we're totally against streetlights thinking, or the idea that there's any enhanced safety with streetlights. We disagree with that altogether, and it sounds like you do as well, that you don't need them for safety.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with you, Dave, and just realized for us, it's a concession, so we're reducing what we require.
Sure.
So, you know, if he asked for 24, I probably would like 24. I like the look of the narrower streets. I want more planted area.
Keep in mind also that although tonight is not a night of discussion of TIF, we have a huge expense a big hurdle that we need to overcome to even make this development possible, and that is with the expansion of the Mill Creek Water Reclamation District to the tune of $25 million. And that is one of the big nuts that's going to have to be challenged with the use of a TIF or some other financial incentives. So simply just keep adding cost and thinking that we have the dollars to spend isn't necessarily so. You put so many additional costs onto the project, and all of a sudden, the existing residents don't have another option other than to continue to use well and septic.
Yeah, and my biggest concern is that with this development going in, that if these homes, if their septic system fail as a result of the development, or the wells fail as a result of the development, that the cost to tie in could create a health and safety issue if there's not the finances to do the hookups. So it's not to stick you guys with a bill and hook up every house downtown LaFox to well and septic, but it is to ensure that if anything does happen during this development, that everybody that it's an affordable solution. And that's really what I'm trying to accomplish, and I'm trying to paint a picture of there's an offset, a balance, that if we can, find some economy in the roads, that this is something that may or may not even come up. I mean, it's a fixed savings, and it's a rolling the dice if anybody even signs up and wants the well, or the water and sewer tap. So that was the reason I was throwing it out there, not to stick you with a bill, but to make sure that these folks, that they're not put in a bad spot.
Janet, go ahead.
I want to make sure that Nick has an opportunity to continue his thoughts on the rest of these conditions, but I wanted to support the notion that he brought up regarding the people in historic LaFox. We're not talking about 100 houses or even dozens of houses. We're talking about 12 to 15 properties here. And as Trustee Boatner pointed out, if as a result of this development, really even one person's septic goes bad or one person's well goes dry, and we are effectively, whether it's us, whether it's you, whether it's all of us, taking the position that not our problem, this is it is our problem, and people have already brought this up in the public hearings. They're concerned about it, and they're not wrong to bring it up. There are people that understand that their wells are shallow. There are people that understand that, septics were provisioned all sorts of different ways in times past. And so these are real concerns, and I think Trustee Boatner is trying to craft a way that you're not being stuck with a bill per se, but there's a trade-off, and saying, well, we're looking to give on one aspect of this, and this cost is the other side of it. I would also add that the notion of recapture for the main lines going back to Mill Creek wouldn't seem to me that would apply in this case, because, as you pointed out, for any of this to happen, for any of this to be realized that we're looking here, there needs to be a TIF that would fund the water and sewer. And so it sounds like that's not going to be your money, right? That's going to be TIF money anyway. And so it would be the decision of the TIF administrator as to whether they wanted to facilitate this.
I'd like to just jump in there. The TIF area is the bounded area of the development.
Well, I
and
didn't get there
LaFox is
yet.
not in
I didn't
the
get there
TIF.
yet, so thank you. But the other issue that didn't come up here yet, but which Administrator Rooney was leading to, is that our understanding is that no matter what financial relief we might provide for people in historic LaFox, in order to avail yourself of that hookup to the water and sewer, it would involve a connection to the village. And it's not because we're trying to be heavy-handed about it, but my understanding is that would just be the mechanics of it. So I applaud the idea to try and look out for people in historic LaFox and see whether there's a way that we can make sure that they're covered. Because you mentioned just generally, Trustee Boatner, health and safety, but if your well goes dry, if your septic field fails, and you don't have the 30 grand that you might need to take care of it right now, you can't live in that house. So it's a significant issue for the people who live.
If I could, maybe we need to take a little bit of a step back. If you recall, and maybe you don't know this, that this entire development, before we even came before the Village of Campton Hills with the development, there was meetings with all of the surrounding property owners, the 5 different groups, and they provided I'll say a wish list, or a list of items that they felt they needed in order to support the project. We took that list and we met, I believe, 95, 98% of that list. Nowhere on that list did it say, we want our houses connected to the sanitary sewer and the water's main. What was on the list was provide us with a spot where we can connect to the water pipe and the sewer pipe, and we, the residents, will, if and when we need it, will extend that on LaFox Road, and we'll pay the connection fee to the sanitary district. So I appreciate and I hear you're trying to, I'll say, protect some of those residents, but early on, those meetings were had, and everyone understood this, and they knew what could be, what problems there could be, and what their request was, that provide us the pipe and the connection points that we can connect to it. And that's what we've have stood behind. So,
Mike, did you want to jump in real quick?
Yeah, I actually had some time to think about this. So, this will be in, there's a chunk here that will be in the village by annexation. We could use TIF for infrastructure, we can use TIF to run a sanitary sewer between those 2 connections, and then just leave that available for them to tie on. That would be the best thing we could do. Is then all they have to do is go cut the street, put a Y in, and they're good to go. And we
So
could do that with the
You're talking
TIF.
about putting the lateral connecting the
Here to
main
that, we'd have to connect. Yeah, because
So you, if we put that.
And they have to annex.
Currently, it's not, that lateral main is not in the plan.
Yep.
You're asking to put that
So
in.
you're saying putting like a buffalo box, like a valve in
Yeah.
front of, like a tap in front of,
Yeah,
Well,
maybe not a
wait.
B-box, because that'll rot over time,
You don't put it in until
but
they,
at least have the main there.
okay.
We could do that, and it'll circulate. We could do that.
And they were invited to come into our village, and they just decided they
Yeah, well,
wanted
this
to
would-
just, yeah,
They
stay as
they
they
could then
are.
spend their money to repair their
Yeah.
septic and stay out of the village if they want.
Yeah.
but
but-
it's a little late for us to amend the TIF boundary.
Well, this is in TIF boundary right here. You've already got that much of it in there, and you can get an easement there, and you can subject that to the needs of the TIF to make a connection. That would be eligible. You could do that. Okay.
With that caveat,
Do you want to speak? I'll bring Drew up, yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate this conversation. As recently as this morning's meeting, I asked about maybe doing exactly what you just proposed with TIF money. There seem to be some challenges on the location of the TIF district. A couple of things I'll mention. Dave was correct in what our original requests from him were, but actually I'll elaborate, and we asked that the capacity be available at the plant. So if that capacity wasn't paid for and bought when the $25 million hopeful expansion of the Mill Creek district moves forward, even if they wanted to hook up, the answer would be, well, there's no capacity, it's never been provided. So we asked that the developer, he's going to build 900 homes, we asked him to provide capacity for 925, which would cover everything in the historic district, even some sheds that might have a bathroom in them. So if you take that 925, divide that into 25 million, which is an estimate at this time, but they're spending about $500,000, $500,000, to provide that set-aside capacity for future use that may never be used. But
if they
also,
don't tap in.
if it's there, if it's 25 years from now, it'll still be there, bought and paid for, with the improvements that would be done now. But I don't want the committee to, or the board to be misled. There, as of right now, there is no main going down that street. So if two people's septics go out and they can't replace it with a new septic, there's not enough room. It's not just a matter of hooking up from the house to a main. It's getting together with your neighbors, maybe taking out a loan, as a group, and put in a main and put it in the lateral. So it's, a decent project. It's not as simple as just a hookup. If there was a way that we could do that, we would love it.
Well, and to further my thought, we could keep it within the TIF boundary for now if we want to, because that pond that's there, we're going to the center of La Fox there. You can stub a lateral out there, put a manhole at the end of that before we leave the TIF boundary as it is, and then you could do a diminishing recapture on that line.
Yeah, I just saw the sewer and water layout today for the first time, and I was hoping maybe to go over it with Dave and think of some other options. One gentleman, Dr. Zander, and I have met with a very reasonable person, and, the hookup that's proposed for his future option to do, crosses under the railroad tracks.
Oh,
And,
yeah, we're
call
way
up-
better than that.
Yeah, call up UP and ask them how much that's gonna be. So, yeah, if there's something we could come up with, a very simpler set of options, and B, if there was a finance mechanism, that would be wonderful.
Okay, thank you, Drew. All right, Nick, are
Yeah,
you?
so I think the compromise would be to make sure the utility plan stubbed out at the TIF boundary. And so if the 25 homeowners had to run a line, it would be much diminished in the length of distance of putting in the pipe. But they would probably want to get more than just one person doing it, because they'd want to share that cost of that lateral if they were in the middle of it. If.
All right, are you?
Is
Anything
that,
else?
I'm hearing,
No.
getting a sense that there's the group of you would like to see a utility plan that makes sure all the water and sewer stubs at the as close as we can to the annexation/TIF boundary.
As far as spending TIF dollars go, I would say that would be the top of my list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess we're doing a roundtable. I don't mean to take up a ton of time, but my last thing was.
It's
being
your
that-
turn still.
Yeah, I'll be quick on the rest of it. Being that this is a conservation neighborhood, I noticed that all of our plantings, they're native. Yeah, I mean, they're labeled, a lot is labeled native. I went through the list, seems like there's a lot of native things. I don't know how difficult it would be to add in drought-tolerant native species, how big of a wrench that throws in the landscape design, but additionally, I'd like to hear from Dave as well on this, but could we make this a no irrigation neighborhood when they're going in as new construction, not limiting homeowners from adding irrigation? But talk to me about how big of a wrench that throws into things, or were you not going to do irrigation anyway? Talk to me about it.
We don't typically provide irrigation. We are pretty much against using potable water to make your grass green. However, the reality is that a utility company, as much as they want you to suggest or think that don't use a lot of water, their revenue is generated by the more water you use. They also, if you're going to use the water, typically it goes down the drain and comes back to them, and you're paying a fee for the water and cleaning the water and disposing of the dirty water. If you throw it on your grass, they don't have the expense of doing something with that water returning. The utility company, one of their design items is they would like to make sure that they don't have to have watering restrictions like they do in Mill Creek today, where they have the odd-even program. They would like all their customers to water any day of the week and as much watering as they need to do or want to do. So
They have stated that in the one meeting I've had with them. They want freedom, no restrictions on irrigation. As-
Sure. So as far as the new construction goes, you're going to be putting one water sewer meter in. It won't be a separate meter for your irrigation. And you're not installing as an option on the homes an irrigation system? You won't be offering it as an option?
So we don't provide the meter. That's actually provided by the sanitary district. There's only one, they only have one meter. They meter your water coming in, but they charge you a sanitary, a potable water and a sanitary rate for that water coming in. So there's no meter for the water exiting the home. So the meters are provided by the sanitary district. We don't typically provide irrigation systems. We have done a few. In Norton Lake, there was a few. You wouldn't break my heart if you said, Dave, we don't want you to provide irrigation systems. I don't know that I would, get worried about that, but I can guarantee you that there's going to be residents coming down here as soon as we tell them that they can't have an irrigation system. They're going to be coming asking you for a permit to put in an irrigation system.
And that I actually covered in the condition that I drafted, that would be fine. If residents decide to put an irrigation system in, but I really wanted to limit it on the new construction, just to discourage having drought-tolerant native species planted, no irrigation system as an option, kind of encouraging this sort of water conservation, native species, the whole thing kind of.
I don't know enough about the native species to,
For the drought-tolerant
the
part?
drought-tolerant
And truly, I don't either, so I don't know how achievable it is, but
Sure.
hopefully it is achievable.
I just would caution you, that we could say all that and give him that condition, but we can't overrule what the Mill Creek Sanitary District is going to want us to not have a watering restriction. But they got a lot of say in how the water,
But I think the small step of not putting irrigation on new construction as an option discourages that, and folks will have to then
Yeah.
go in, tear up the yard, put it in.
Jim is
Sure,